Hello everyone. For this week's tutorial, I'd like to discuss the looks blocks in the Scratch engine. The first of these, gone over last week, was say hello for 2 seconds. However, you may notice that you can edit the hello into so that you can have it say any text for any number of seconds. However, as mentioned in the first video, the more seconds you have, the more data it will consume because it is a bigger number. Generally though, since you don't want your character to speak for more than 10 seconds, you don't have to worry about getting excessively high numbers. One thing to be careful about when using the say or think type blocks is that only integer, aka whole number, numbers are supported, and decimals will not work very well. You may remember in the first unit on digital graphics, I stated that characters take 128 bits per character. This is actually useful information here because the data your string takes up is exactly equal to the data each character takes up times the number of characters in the string. This means that a very lengthy phrase will take up more power to process than a simple one word. The next block is say hello, which might seem repetitive, but this time there is no specific number of seconds. So it will say whatever you specify indefinitely. The next block, think for 2 seconds, works exactly the same way as the say hello for 2 seconds example. It's just that the appearance of the balloon is different because it's a thought balloon rather than a speech balloon. Like so. The last of the main options, think is like say hello, and that it does it indefinitely rather than a specific number of seconds. The next bunch of look options starts at switch costume to, and the default graphic has only 2 options, costume 1 or costume 2. So the switch costume option simply loads the appropriate image, called a costume in the Scratch engine, like so. The next option, next costume, also switches costumes, except instead of letting you switch to a specific costume, just switches to the next available one. However, both take up the same amount of processing power, and that they both load one image, which, if you remember from the digital graphics unit, has a file size of number of vertical pixels times number of horizontal pixels, called the resolution, times the bit depth, aka color depth, for each pixel. Although much of the data is reduced by the compression algorithm for JPEG, PNG, or GIF files, depending on what format the image is that you're loading. The next option is switch backdrop to backdrop 1, which simply changes the backdrop to the backdrop specified. And just like switch costume has a next costume counterpart, so does switch backdrop have a next backdrop counterpart. One thing to note, as you may be already able to tell by looking, is that the backdrop is generally always larger than the sprites, and so would have to have a larger image resolution as well, for the image to appear smooth and not pixelated. This means that loading backdrops would therefore take up more power/data than loading sprites. Although you would still use the same formula as sprites to figure out the exact amount of data, i.e. the image resolution times the color depth of the image, minus data discarded by your chosen compression algorithm. The next group of look options is size. And the first of these is change size by number, although the number has to be an integer here as well, just like with the say and think commands. This command will cause the graphic to grow by the factor specified, respective to the center point. Note by default, the graphics in Scratch are vector graphics. So if you change the size of something, it will automatically recalculate its resolution. A thing to note about the change size command is that it does not grow over time. It changes the size instantly, like this. You can also enter in a negative value to make it go the other way, i.e. shrink around the center point. The other option is set size to percentage, which instead of changing the size by a relative amount, sets it to an absolute percentage of its value. Note that just like with change size, vector graphics will recalculate the resolution when you set the size to different amounts. The next effect I like to discuss is change color effect by number, which changes the color of the image by the amount specified over the number wheel, like this. Note that color refers to hue. Remember that changing the color contents of an image does not affect its file size, because it still has the same color depth no matter what specific colors you use. You may notice how there's a drop-down menu at color, just like there is a number option at the 25. The next option right after color on the drop-down menu is fisheye, which is the name for the bulging effect created by the grow option on the warp transform in Photoshop. And it is given that name because it bulges like the eye on a fish. Like so. Notice how the warp transform is applied around the center of the image, just like scaling or resizing the image. You can also have a negative amount to give it a pinched in look. The next option is whirl, which whirls the image clockwise around its center. As you may be able to guess, a negative amount whirls it counterclockwise. The next effect I like to go over is pixelate, which reduces an image's resolution for a more pixelated look. Sadly, in the Scratch engine, There is no easy way to increase an image's resolution quickly, like you can easily decrease it. So a negative amount will have the same effect as a positive amount. The next effect is mosaic, which creates multiple small copies of the image by the amount specified. Note that because the smaller images are evenly distributed, the total resolution will be the same as in the original image. And it would not logically make sense for there to be a negative mosaic effect. So a negative amount will do the same exact thing as a positive counterpart. The next option, brightness, affects the image's value instead of hue. So a positive brightness will make the image value brighter, and a negative value will make it darker. The final effect, ghost, affects its alpha transparency. Note that because it already has zero transparency relative to the amount you change it at zero, it would logically not make sense to have a negative amount, so nothing will happen. However, if you load an image with alpha transparency in it already, like a PNG, the negative amount will decrease the transparency that you loaded the image with. The next option, set color effect to number, does the same exact thing with all the same options as the previous one. It's just that it's an absolute value instead of a relative change. The final option is clear graphic effects, which removes all the custom look effects you have applied to it and reverts it to the normal image that you loaded it with. The next two options are very straightforward, and they are show, although the image is showing by default, and hide, which makes the graphic renderer not draw the image. The next two options are layer options, with go to a specific layer, the options either being front or back, and the next option being go forward or backward a specific number of layers, instead of to the absolute layer number. Note that even if you tried, you cannot get behind the background layer. The Scratch engine is hard-coded, so that it is always at the bottommost layer. The final look-related options are variables, with the first variable being costume, and it can be either costume number or the string of the costume name. The next option is the backdrop variable, with either the number or the string name of the backdrop. And the final variable is size, where the size is a percentage, so the default size is 100 rather than 1. Now that I've gone over all of the looks options in the Scratch engine, I can discuss how to work with costumes in the Scratch engine in next week's tutorial video. Don't forget to subscribe if you found this video informative, and make sure to see other tutorial videos, and follow me on either Facebook or Twitter for more content.